Hello, thanks for coming to the, I guess it's mandatory, depends on how mandatory you think mandatory is when you're a member of a club and not a member of the military anymore, so. But thanks again. So the reason we're having it is not that we've had mishaps here, but throughout the Air Force Aero Club system, we've had 6 mishaps in 6 months. And so the leadership at the top really wanted us to have a meeting. They wanted to have a down day. They got and talked in that, letting us have a safety brief. So that's what we're doing. So I'm just going to go off the memo that they wanted us to go off of. So of course there's been increased mishaps, and they said it's due to poor flight preparation, a lack of checklist discipline, failure to follow published guidelines and regulations, faulty judgment, and bad decision making.
Doesn't it apply to all accidents?
It does, but apparently it's a bigger deal when we fly airplanes. So I'll share the mishaps with you. So the following mishaps occurred the last 6 months. One was at Elmendorf, Alaska on 31 December. It was a Cessna 172R. The aircraft crashed on the runway of Hope Airport, an unmonitored field, due to the main landing gear digging into soft snow, causing an unstable landing. The result was total loss of the aircraft. No injuries were sustained by the student pilot or instructor. So these are all the details we give us. They didn't tell us about the investigation, what they found in the investigation. So the second one was at Holloman Air Force Base on 23 December of 21. It was a Cessna 172. Solo student pilot reported tail of the aircraft rised up after landing, which caused the propeller to strike the ground. Most probable cause was due to the hard landing with subsequent bounce and improper recovery procedures by the student pilot. Damage to the propeller, no injuries were sustained by the student pilot. Does that sound familiar? Bounce landing?
Focusing.
Yeah. So the next one is at Robbins Air Force Base on 22 May. It was a Piper Aero. Aircraft landing gear did not deploy while landing at Perry Hudson County Airport, causing aircraft to land and skid on the belly. Significant damage is still being assessed. No injuries to the pilot and the instructor. The incident is still pending a complete investigation by the FAA and Air Force Safety. The other one was at Kirkland Air Force Base on 10 June. It was a T-41C. Solo student pilot struck the left wingtip of the propeller on the ground while landing at Grants Airport on a solo cross-country due to experiencing a wind gust on landing and overcompensating control inputs for the crosswind. Winds at Grant were reported at 230 at 7, gusting to 16, but the windsocks were hanging dead when overflying the airfield. There was a significant damage to the left wingtip and the propeller, no injuries to the student pilot. So,
Mac, did you get any information? That's 4. Well, the other 2 were.
no,
Anybody reported those?
those are the only ones that they're letting us brief.
Yeah.
So, so what do you guys get out of those? 'Cause some sound like an experienced pilot and some sound more like student pilots.
What did that do to our insurance rates? Because I know that insurance rates reflect, you know, what money put out.
Their insurance rates may have gone up, I don't know.
Usually it's across the board.
Right, but, so the Air Force, we're insured through the Air Force,
Yeah, I know.
so I don't know if they raise our rates or not.
They will.
Joe says they will, so they will. So here's our wing safety pilot. Do you have any insight on anything that would happen, sir?
Sure,
I don't mean to call you out, but
that works.
as far as from the safety side, what do you guys see?
So typically, I'm Dave Narvaez, I'm one of the FSOs of the wing. At least typically on the active duty side and the reserve side lately, we've been seeing, I know a lot of you are probably experienced pilots and you're not flying something as complicated as say a C5 or a C-17. But at least on my side, I can speak to seeing fatigue and checklist discipline being a lot of major factors, the reason why people are, even on the maintenance side, backing up jets in the hangars, or people are hitting stuff with other planes, or something as simple as turning off the engine incorrectly. We've seen the whole gamut of that in the last couple weeks. So just harping on checklist discipline and things like fatigue. If you feel tired, sick, anything like that, don't take the chance, just don't fly that day, don't risk it. But that's at least what's going on our end, so it's equally important.
Thank you. So they also wanted us to brief, or we can actually, they're more, I don't think they're necessarily briefing areas, but I think they're more discussion topics. And I think we cover it all the time, as far as instructors or just pilots in general, or just people in general. So what they want us to talk about are the regulation compliance, strict adherence to the AFMAN 34152, which is the guidance that our SOP is written off of. Local Aero Clubs SOP, which is off the 152. Guidance and limitations are written to add extra safety margin beyond what's required by the FAA. And you guys all know that. What does the FAA say about how many takeoff and landings for a pilot? What do you need to stay current?
3.
3.
3 takeoff and 3 landings in how many days? And 90 days for the FAA. Well, the Air Force says you need it every 60 days, right? Because the Air Force makes everything more stringent than it does.
Isn't that under so many hours though?
Correct, under 200 hours.
Yes.
So, once again, they just want us to review, because although we do take a test once a year on the SOPs and everything, it's really easy to get complacent. Yep, I know that, yep, I know that. And the next thing you know, you're out of compliance with one of them because you already knew that, but you didn't comply with it. So, and that goes right on with checklist discipline. I can tell you from experience as a student pilot, eventually you think you know everything in the checklist, like, yep, I got this. And then the next thing you know, your instructor looks at you and says, is that what the checklist said? And then you read the checklist and it's not what the checklist said. So they're saying that every aircraft has a published procedures, which you do, including the POH, corresponding checklists, and it tells you how to safely operate the airplane. Following the specific checklist without omitting steps or taking shortcuts is checklist discipline. So can everybody in here say that every time they fly that they don't omit one step on the checklist?
I probably do too.
2. But I can tell you that I can sit here and listen to almost every time somebody shuts down, or you can tell when somebody doesn't run their checklist. And if you see somebody not running their checklist, there's no harm or no foul in asking them, hey, was that in the checklist? Because when they damage something and they did something outside the checklist, then they're not protected. But if you do everything by the checklist and something happens, then you're protected. So if you look at it that way. We had somebody, just a quick point, somebody come rolling in to shut off the airplane, or they were parking, and they rolled to a stop with the engine stopped. Bah, 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 bah. So I looked at them and simply asked, hey, was that in your checklist? I'm sure they hit every single step all the way to turning off the airplane. And they said, yeah, let me check. The one part he missed was parking brake set. Can't set the parking brake in a roll. So, but did he do everything correctly? Everything was set the brake. So that's my point. Even though we're experienced, and a lot of people know they've been around these airplanes for years, it's very simple. Something as simple as setting the brake. It's not in the checklist. Yes, you omitted it, but it's not correct. Flight preparation. So what do we do? What do you guys do to flight prep? What do you do before you take your airplane?
Well, my checklist is like that big, you know.
Correct. So I'm not talking checklist. This is your flight prep. What does Reiner
I
do?
still pull the thing out and walk around with my airplane and touch everything on the list.
Right. So what do you do? Is that all you do? What about your personal? Is there anything you personally do to yourself to make sure that you're okay to fly? The I'm safe checklist or anything?
Well,
I got my phone, so I got my wallet.
Credit cards.
credit card.
Yeah. So, what about you, Baron? You're one of the safest guys I know.
I would do the I'm safe checklist for me, and then I would check the weather,
Right.
and then I would, weather the NOTAMs and TFRs now.
Yeah.
And then I would check the airplane, so I'm making sure I'm okay, that the environment's okay, and then that the airplane's
Right.
okay.
So you're just setting yourself up for success, but you're going to start you're the first key to success, right? Because if you're not mentally in the game, like he was saying, fatigue. So you work up in Wilmington or you work up north or somewhere, right? So I notice you fly in the afternoons. So if you're tired and fatigued all day working, and then you come to fly the airplane, and then when you do this, I was like, yep, I'm good, I'm ready to go, versus like, man, I'm really tired, but I'm already here, so should I go ahead and fly? So you're more likely to make a mistake when you're tired. So there's always a checklist that we have to run, and if, these airplanes, we love them, and they're important, but not every day is so important that you can't fly. Trust me, I love you guys to fly. I love flying myself. So this says a safe and successful flight starts with sound preparation as a foundation for the success. Good preparation starts before you brief to fly and includes ensuring proper rest, nutrition, and the mental state. It continues with mission planning and like checking weather, NOTAMs, flight planning, etc. So all you're doing is trying to set yourself up for success. And the last one is decision making. Anybody got anything on decision making? Can I get an instructor on decision making?
Go arounds.
Always.
Well, what do you guys think? What's good decision versus bad decision?
If you're coming in and you see that you got a crosswind that knocks you off center line, just go around. Too low, correct port, you can't go around. Don't make bad decisions. If you know that something is potentially unsafe, don't do it.
Okay. So do you think more decision making, this says that it's sometimes learned through experiences and practices. So do you think bad decisions or decision making, like aeronautical decision making, do you think everybody has it, or you learn it more by making a bad decision?
From a student pilot standpoint, you definitely learn from making a bad decision and having your instructor look over it and say, why did you do that? So, yeah, I think sometimes you gotta make bad decisions, but as long as you got a guy next to you who's there willing to correct it, who's able to correct it, then,
Right.
yeah.
So, do you think that talking about situations and decisions that people have made can help
Yes.
with decision making?
Yes.
Can you give us an example, Jim?
Discussion of icing, one's experience, that's one way to learn about clouds in January.
It does, oh.
You're gonna land one way or the other.
Right, preferably one's the one you want to learn.
Right. Things like that,
Right.
that we experience in a career of flying, that we made a mistake and didn't, we flew a little too high or a little too low through, across country in the winter. We didn't expect these clouds.
Right.
So we got close to them, went through a little bit of it, picked up a little bit of ice, decided, well, I'm gonna have to start descending or climb above. It depends on the temperature layers.
Right.
But one time I was in North Carolina, I decided to land. And I was there for 2 days waiting for the snow to clear, and
It's better than the
Yeah.
alternative.
had a great time too. Mount Airy, Mayberry, RFD, North Carolina, it's a great place. Anyway, yeah, that happens. You gotta be looking out that window, even at night, with the flashlight for ice. We've done that to Bonanza.
Going out west, yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime you're flying a long distance in the winter, you're gonna get that. You're gonna be subject to that.
Also, don't make plans that are at the limit, meaning, okay, this airplane will go 5 hours, and we're flying 4 hours.
Right.
You know, give yourself at least, if you're, like, our rule is always 1 hour no matter what, we're on the ground.
Right.
Before the hour for fuel, we're talking, the plane carries 7 hours. Normally, we don't fly more than 6.
Right.
5.5, we don't even get to that hour.
But don't plan it on the edge.
Right.
The edge being, okay, I have an hour to go, because next thing you know, that hour's already gone.
It's gone and you may need
Because
it.
you have ran into headwinds you didn't realize.
Yep.
And
Or
now
I
you
do the
now you have
approach
to make.
twice or 3 times. I
Yeah.
think Casey's had to do one 3 times.
Yeah.
That was very brave of him.
And the thing is, now you have to make a decision. Don't put yourself in a position where you may have to make a decision.
Right. Does anybody else got anything else to share? Antoinette?
I would say establishing your own personal norms. So just because the airplanes
Yeah, come up here so everybody can hear.
So I would just say establishing those personal minimums, so just because like the airplane's demonstrated crosswind limit is 17 knots, if you've never flown in a 17-knot crosswind, then you probably shouldn't just go out by yourself and do that. Establish your own minimums, so maybe you've only ever been up like the student pilots, like it seems like the winds picked up and that was past their own minimums, but they pushed it. So external pressures got the best of them and they pushed it past their own personal minimums. So I guess that's just my big thing, quick and simple, like know what you're capable of, don't go exceeding your limits to the point where you don't feel safe in your own airplane anymore. I think it's pretty straightforward. No, like set your limits before you go, no. Like if you're doing instrument, even if you know it's a 400-foot ceiling, but the approach will get me down to 230 feet. If you know you've never flown an approach that low, and you've only ever done it below, I don't know, 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet, maybe that's not the day to go out and try that when it's well below your minimums or ceilings that you've been at before. So just don't put yourself in a situation you've never been in before or way out of your realm just because, I don't know, Joe Schmo's telling you we need to go now, things like that. Oh, well, if we leave now, we might beat this thunderstorm back. Just not getting stuck by external pressures and blowing through your own personal minimums. So just hold true to like what you know you can and can't do.
Yeah, because bend and metal. So we're gonna kind of go over some of these topics. The areas that they wanted us to cover, the emphasis areas. So for the rules and regulations, I just dove into the SOP, because a lot of this talked about crosswinds. And can you almost tell me a day that the winds don't blow in Delaware? You're not getting a crosswind from somewhere? So, what are the day VFR minimums for student pilots? Maybe student pilots? Or just student pilot on that? So day VFR minimums, 2,500 foot ceilings, 1,500 foot if directly supervised by an instructor at the airfield, and 5 statute miles. Night VFR for a student that's not authorized. The maximum wind is 20 knots, maximum crosswind component is 10 knots, and lower if limited by an instructor. Tailwind operations are prohibited. So you guys should know this one, all the private pilots. Do you guys know what the private pilot wind minimums are? Or the wind limitations for private pilots?
Talking about Aero Club,
Aero Club, yeah.
15 knots, or what's in the manual for the aircraft.
Right, so what's your day VFR minimums for an IFR, for a VFR pilot? Private pilot.
3 miles on 1,000 feet.
The day VFR minimums are 1,500 foot ceilings, 3 statute miles availability. Night VFR's local minimum ceiling of 2,500 feet, 5 statute miles of visibility. PIC must have logged something. That's a typo. Pilot command, night cross country, IFR minimums, and flight must be operated under IFR unless, so the minimum winds are 30 knots, maximum crosswind are 15 knots. Aircraft limitations or maximum demonstrated, whichever's less. So the maximum winds in any direction are what again?
30.
30. And our the max crosswind's 15. So another thing about the winds, how fast are we allowed to taxi our Aero Club airplanes? I know everything prior to go is taxi, but
A fast walk,
right, a brisk walk.
Bristol.
So if the winds, what speed are we not allowed to taxi the airplane? And if we get stuck in that situation, what are you supposed to do?
25 knots. And if you get stuck, it's going to have a wing walker. Stop it. Put it to the wind, have a wing walker.
You're half correct, it's 30 knots.
All 30.
But you are correct, you need to stop, wait for a wing walker to get there, and then you can press on with a wing walker. So that says, should a pilot be caught in a situation where the winds exceed 30 knots, the aircraft will be stopped in a safe area, turned into the wind, and wing walker summons. The aircraft should not be moved until wing walkers arrive. How many IFR pilots we got in here? 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. So what are the weather minimums for the IFR? So the weather minimums for IFR takeoff shall be no lower than the lowest compatible circling minimum
minimum.
at the departure airport or the takeoff minimum listed and the terminal flight information publication, whichever is greater, or for which the aircraft is equipped to fly. So if everybody flies these all the time, and everybody knows these because we get tested on them once a year, we didn't get a lot of answers. You know what I mean? And that's where they're talking about complacency, because like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Yeah, I know. We read it. I took a test. But when something happens and we bend metal or break airplanes or ourselves, then they go back to, oh yeah, I probably should have reviewed that before I left. I didn't think it was that bad. So that's the point that they're getting to. And I don't disagree with it, because I don't think there's probably a day gone by that's been here that hasn't been windy, especially this time of year. So now we're getting into checklist discipline. Who here thinks that they're 100% on their checklist discipline?
I try to be, but sometimes.
So I can tell you that if you've got a text message from me with a picture that something wasn't taken care of on the airplane, you missed a step in the checklist. So just straight out of the SOP. So all aircraft will be tied down between flights unless you know that the next pilot is cleared and ready to go. You secure the aircraft with tie downs at each wing and the tail. Chock the main wheels and install the control surface, pitot tube covers, and release the parking brake. You know how many pitot tubes I found uncovered this month? At least 3.
Tow bar should be stowed. Not on those.
You know how many tow bars I found this month? 1.
Just one. Oh, good, that's down 50%.
Down 50%.
We're making progress.
We're making progress. But I told you guys, I will brief this until we don't have a problem. And by problem, I mean that somebody actually, we go a whole month without an incident. And I know that I do the same thing. I get in a hurry and I want to get out of here too. But when you land, you have things you have to take care of. And it's your checklist. And once again, yep, I know, I got it, yep, I got everything. And you get it out, and then you get a text message. And all you had to do is read 2 more steps in your checklist, and you'd have it all covered. So if you're missing steps there, what are we missing when we're going down a taxiway if you're all by yourself, when there's nobody there to watch? The descent checklist. I always miss the descent checklist, because I never think about descending in these things, because I'm a student. I'm always told what to do. But my instructor says, okay, so we're getting lined up because you got a second, now review the checklist. So we review every part of the checklist. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, I missed that. You have time, so review the checklist. It's there. We provide it for you, and you don't even have to memorize it. And I'm not saying that we're in big violation of it, but I can tell you that we're not 100% on it, and that's me included. Because I got caught on the same engine shutdown that somebody else got caught on. And when I got it shut down, my instructor was like, was that in the checklist? Let me read it. Nope, I missed it. I flopped sweat steps. So it was there, it was just out of order. And everything's put in for a reason, right? So there's a big one right now that I focus on. It's cleaning the windshields and the bugs off the wings. A lot of people get text messages, hey, did you clean the wings? Oh no, sorry, I forgot. Hey, did you clean the windshield? Oh no, sorry, I forgot. Well, it's not that big of a deal to me, but it's a bigger deal to the person that's picking up the airplane after you, because now they have to pick up after you. Or they're flying and they really can't see because there's a lot of bugs. So I'm just saying, if you don't want that to happen to you, just do it for the person after you. And that way I don't have to text message you. So we talk a lot about the flight prep. So what was that checklist that we talked about again?
Yeah, I'm safe thing.
I'm safe, right. Do we remember what those are? You know what the I's for?
Illness.
Illness, yeah. So if you're feeling sick or whatever, is this flight really that important? Some people have sinus issues, you know, whatever. It could be literally anything. The second one, the M?
Medications.
Medications. Some people, you never know, maybe your allergy medicine makes you drowsy or something. You know what the S is?
Stress.
Stress. Very stressful going to the Aero Club because the air boss is a jerk. I know, I heard it. You know what the A is for?
Alcohol.
Bottle to throttle, baby. Yeah. And the F, fatigue. So once again, it's that time of year, everybody's busy. Barbecues, we're doing this, we're doing that. Oh, I gotta go fly, but I didn't get that much sleep because, man, we had a good time last night, and I got a flight first thing in the morning. So which one gives, the airplane or you? So Joe, can you tell me, because JJ said it was eating, and the website says it's emotions for the E. Isn't, you could be an
Depends on
emotional,
what you read.
huh?
It depends on what you read.
You could be an
They have
emotional
it
leader?
both ways.
Okay, because somebody said that emotions would go into stress, that portion.
Yeah, but it's the older version, that's what they used, and then they changed it to eating later on.
Okay. Which I don't disagree, because if I'm hungry, I'm not thinking about flying. Or not as much as I should be thinking about flying. So I looked through some stuff on aeronautical decision-making. And when you take your check ride at the FAA, do you guys they talk about that, right? Aeronautical decision-making,
Yeah,
a little bit, they touch on it?
well, they test you on it a little bit.
Right. So, the thing that I Googled really quick, because I was looking for stuff we could talk about, was risk management. And I know in the Air Force, Jesus, that's all they talked about was risk management. And you guys could probably tell us in about a day and a half how many things you had to fill out on risk management. Yep, this, not only yourself, but the crew, and the crew had to fill it out, and then you had to talk about it. And then you could do your brief, and then you get to talk about it again. So risk management's a really big thing. So the goal of risk management is to proactively identify safety-related hazards and mitigate the associated risks. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. One that I really like, that I like it as a student pilot because there's somebody with me. So you kind of I try to treat the airplane kind of like as a crew. I'll try to brief it as a crew. Look, if I can't do it, I know I'm a student, you're the instructor. You know, if I can't do it, by all means, please take it. And if you have problems, whatever, it's like when you get into a situation, you're a crew because you're both going to end up in the same spot. And it's also a single pilot resource manager. So this says that the SRM is all about helping pilots learn how to gather information, analyze it, and make decisions. Although the flight is coordinated by a single person and not on board by a flight crew, the use of available resources such as autopilot, air traffic control, replicates the principles of crew management for your resources. So how many of you fly with an iPad? So you don't really have to make any calls, right? You can pretty much look everything up you want on your iPad. You can send your flight stuff, right?
You used a briefing on there, but it has a record that you got that briefing from somewhere.
Autopilot, who uses autopilot in here? When it works,
You
I know,
have to.
sorry, we're trying. But those are all things. So, who's flown multi-crew airplanes in here?
What do you mean multi-crew?
Meaning more than one person, I'm sorry, like crew aircraft, like C5, C-17s. Airline guys, they fly, what, 6.7s or whatever the cool ones. You know, airline guys. So, you guys brief a lot, sir. You're an airline, correct? Where am?
Still am.
And what do you guys, I don't know much about commercial, other than I sit in the back.
Oh.
What do you guys talk about this, basically, when you guys show up to the airport, you start your crew brief or pre-flight or?
Captain, first officer, we talk about threats. What's a threat for us? Maybe it's hunger, food, what's outside, maybe it's the weather, maybe it's a person, maybe it's a passenger that's disgruntled. You notice that we usually talk about the threats, and then you go over the briefing for the routes and what we'll do on the accomplished routes. At the same time, if there's a threat, there should be a barrier. What can you do to mitigate that threat?
Right.
To nullify it or put it back? Because maybe you're both doing a long 5-hour flight from Los Angeles to New York, and you're going to be tired by the time you do 5 hours. What are you going to do after the 5 hours? You know you're both going to be tired doing an approach. How are you going to wake yourself up? So to mitigate that threat, we get up, use the restroom, go look around, go talk, exercise basically is what it is.
Right.
Get the oxygen back into your brain, and then you'll go back. So when you see those crew taking a break, it's really they're trying to exercise, stretch their legs.
Right.
So you got a threat, how are you going to mitigate that threat? So we talk about that. What else do we do? And at the same time, but there's another issue, call in whoever else you can find, the flight attendants, dispatchers on the ground. You got your iPad, send a quick message, hey, I see something, is this the weather significant? Or call air traffic control, do you see something in front of me? Because back when I was learning to fly, I needed guidance because I didn't have radar, I had nothing on the airplane, so I asked the ETC.
So that's
"Hey,
kind of like
do you
flight
see
following,
something?"
right? I hear a lot of people, we fly on the weekends, and I hear people here, yeah, I want flight following from here to there.
And they'll give you a nice vector right around, whatever you want, but get a vector around.
So everything's there to help you, right?
Use all your resources.
Yeah, and if you don't, it's your fault. So there's hazards and there's risks. It says the definition elements of aeronautical decision-making are hazards and risks. A hazard is a real or perceived condition, event, or circumstance that a pilot encounters. And a risk is an assessment of the single or cumulative hazards facing the pilot. So we all come up with hazards and risks, right? So is the risk worth the reward? I guess in the end is kind of what you have to ask yourself. Is this hazard worth the effort it's going to take to get around it? And then human factors, once again, everything rolls right back into the human factors, which I'm kind of, can you share that, what was that other checklist? Because I was talking with Nick about the I'm Safe checklist, and the paver.
Oh, right. Yeah, so pilot, it's just all the wrap that goes. So the pilot, the I'm Safe checklist we talked about. Aircraft, so following, like making sure it has its documents, making sure the aircraft's airworthy, running your pre-flight appropriately, things like that. The V is kind of a weird one, but it's environment. So checking your weather, making sure that you know of any NOTAMs. Okay, this taxiway usually takes closed notes, things like that. So just making sure you know your airport information, your NOTAMs, weather, just the environment. And then E is external pressures. So like I was talking about earlier, like if you know that this person is pressuring you and they're saying, no, it's okay to go, or things like that, like that you have set a number and you're saying, no, it's below these numbers, we don't go. I don't feel well. And they say, oh, well, you'll be fine, it's just allergies, but I feel really badly, and you know it, so you don't go. So it's just not like succumbing to external pressures, that's the last part. But it just wraps up everything we've talked about today a little bit shorter. That's the page.
Well, as I'll tell you, I still use the Air Force Once acronym before I go fly that you were asking about preparation to fly. I still use the Once acronym. Weather, activate, NOTAMs, told. Instead of the S was military for secrets, now I use sign out the airplane.
That helps.
Weather, activate, NOTAMs, told, sign out the airplane.
So old habits, and another thing I've talked to some of my instructors about, and even I think it's a good idea, even with private pilots, commercial pilots, but everybody has a habit, right? Everything you do, we're all kind of habit oriented. So okay, the first thing I do is I wake up. Some people brush their teeth, some people go get coffee, some people exercise, but whatever your habit of the day is, it's always your habit. And when you don't do that, you know that something's different, correct? Whenever, like, so I wake up and I go get coffee. If I didn't make coffee the night before, then I'm out of my habit pattern. And flying airplanes should be the exact same way. When I first started, before I went to school on C5s, I was getting ready to cross here and I was talking to an engineer. And he said the key to being a good engineer is everything happens the exact same way every time. When he's talking about your checklist, when you're talking about your pre-flight, when all that stuff, everything should happen the same way every time. So that way when something doesn't happen, it should alert you, like, hey, something's not right. Either I missed something or there's something wrong. And so if you take that approach with the airplanes when you're flying, with your pre-flight, takeoff, cruise, descent, landing, everything should happen the same way every time. Or as close to as the same as every time, because that way you don't miss something. Or if something does happen, it should ring a bell. And anybody who's flown C5s, everything happens the exact same way almost every time, and when it doesn't, everybody's like, whoa, what was that? How come that didn't happen?
It's a ballet.
Yeah. So, and I think these airplanes, same way, same thing in your car. If you're driving down the road in a car and you hear something, an odd noise, or it feels weird, what's the first thing you do? Something's weird. So we could do that with ourselves, with our checklists and everything. So the whole thing is we just need to be safe, and we need that. We don't want to be another statistic at the Air Force meeting. We don't need to have a mishap. And I don't think we're close to having a mishap. I haven't seen anybody dangerous. But if you guys, by all means, this is your club. I just get to be the one with the keys. So if you see somebody doing wrong, there's nothing wrong with approaching them and saying, hey, was that in the checklist? Or, hey, I flew the airplane after you yesterday, the windshield was nasty. Oh man, sorry, my wife had an accident, I had to get out. There's reasons that things happen, but there's no reason that we can't at least hold each other accountable for the rules and the regulations. So, with that, has anybody got anything else? Is there a story? You got anything to add to that? Joe, you got anything to add? No. Instructors have anything to add?
I can add something.
Okay.
So when it comes to decision making, you were talking about you notice something wrong. That's the first part of it. The FAA has a model, actually has several, the DECIDE model, the 3P model. If you've talked to a Marine, you might have heard of the OODA loop. I mean, these were made so that you can remember, I need to do something, and I need to do it again and again and again. And whatever that is, the 3P model is super simple. Perceive, you notice something is wrong. Process, you figure out what it is and what you need to do. And perform, you do it. And then you go back to step one. Did it do what I wanted it to do? So we're constantly making decisions in the airplane. And usually the decision is everything's fine, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. But when things aren't fine, when things change, you need to change something and respond to it.
That's a great idea. Anybody else? All right, well, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming. I'm sorry this doesn't count for July's meeting, but maybe we won't have to cover this stuff in July. Yeah, once again, thanks. We'll see you in July, I don't know the date. But I'll send an email, and we're gonna have it in person as well. Thanks.